Chapter 19 of Grace Harlowe's Plebe Year at High School. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Christine Blashford. Grace Harlowe's Plebe Year at High School by Jessie Graham Flower. Chapter 19. Wolves. Wolves! The name was terrifying enough, but their cry, that long drawn-out, hungry call, gave the picnickers a chill of apprehension. "We must take the nearest way out of the wood, Reddy," exclaimed Tom. "They are still several miles off, and if we hurry we may reach the open before they do." All started on a run, David helping Anne to keep up with the others, while Reddy looked after Jessica. Nora and Grace were well enough trained in outdoor exercise to run without any assistance from the boys. Indeed, Grace Harlowe could outrun most boys of her own age. "Go straight to your left," called Reddy, consulting his compass as he hurried Jessica over the snow. Again they heard the angry howl of the wolves, and the last time it seemed much nearer. "It's a terrible business, this running after a heavy meal," muttered Hippy, gasping for breath as he stumbled along in the track of his friends. "I'll make a nice meal for 'em if they catch me," he added, "and it looks as if I'd be the first to go." "Reddy, are you sure you're right?" called Tom. "The woods don't seem to be thinning out as they are likely to do toward the edge." "Keep going," called Reddy, confident of the direction. "You see, we had gone pretty far in, but I believe the open country is about a mile this way." A mile? Good heavens! Jessica and Anne were already stumbling from exhaustion, while Hippy was quite winded. Another 5 minutes of this, and at least 3 of the party would be food for wolves, unless something could be done. So thought David, who, breathless and lightheaded, was now almost carrying Anne. "Hurrah!" cried Grace, who had been running ahead of the others. "Here's Jean's hut!" There, sure enough, right in front of them, was a little house built of logs and mud. Had it been put in that particular spot years ago just to save their 8 lives now? Anne wondered vaguely as she blindly stumbled on. As Grace lifted the wooden latch of the door, she looked over her shoulder. Not 300 yards away loped 5 gaunt gray animals. Their tongues hung limply from the sides of their mouths and their eyes glowered with a fierce hunger. "Hurry!" she cried in an agony of fear. "Oh, hurry!" Tom and David were carrying Anne now, while Jessica was half staggering, assisted by Nora and Reddy. Hippy, the perspiration pouring from his face, brought up the rear, and they had scarcely pulled him in and barred the door before the wolves had reached the hut and were leaping against the walls, howling and snarling. Nobody spoke for some time. Those who were not too tired were busy thinking. What was to be done? 8 young people on a bitter cold winter afternoon, shut up in a hut in the middle of a forest, while 5 half-starved wolves besieged the door. Presently Tom Gray began to look about him. There was a fireplace in the hut, which, by great good luck, contained the remains of a large backlog. More fuel was stacked in the corner, chiefly brushwood and sticks. He made a fire at once, and the others gathered around the blaze, for they felt the penetrating chill now after their rapid and exhausting flight through the forest. "Here's a rifle!" exclaimed Grace, who was also exploring, while Tom kindled the fire. "Good!" cried Tom. "Let's see it. It may be our salvation." He seized the gun and examined the barrel, but alas, there was only 1 shot left in it. They searched the hut for more cartridges, but not one could they find. In the meantime, the wolves, which might have been taken for large collie dogs at a little distance, were trotting round the house, leaping against the door and windows, and occasionally giving a blood-curdling howl. "Suppose you feed me to them," groaned Hippy. "You could get almost to Oakdale before they finished me." The suggestion seemed to break the apprehensive silence that had settled down upon them, and they burst out laughing, one and all, even Anne, who was lying on a bearskin in front of the fire. "I suppose the beasts were driven down from the hills by hunger, and when they smelled the fat bacon frying, the woods couldn't hold them," observed David. "I have always heard that a hungry wolf could smell something to eat on another planet." "Well, what are we going to do?" demanded Nora. "If we leave this charming abode of Jean's, we shall be eaten alive, and if we stay in it, we shall starve." "You won't starve for a while yet, child. You've only just eaten. You remind me of the story of the people who were locked up in a vault in the cemetery. They divided the candle into notches and decided to eat a notch apiece every day. They had just finished the last notch and were expecting to die at any moment of starvation when somebody unlocked the door. And how long do you suppose they had been shut up?" "Several days, I suppose," answered Nora, "since they appeared to have eaten several notches." "Not at all," replied David. "Only 3 hours." "I'd rather be in a vault with the dead than out here," observed Hippy. "Are we such poor company as all that, Fatty?" laughed Reddy. "I've made a great find," announced Tom Gray in the midst of their chatter. He was standing on a bench examining something on a shelf suspended from the ceiling. "What?" demanded the others in great excitement. "A pair of snowshoes," he answered. There was a disappointed silence. "Well, don't all speak at once," said Tom at last. "Don't you agree with me that it's a great find?" "We are sorry we can't enthuse," answered David, "but we fail to see how snowshoes can help us out of our present predicament." "Nobody here knows how to use them," continued Reddy, "and even if he did, he couldn't outrun a pack of wolves." I know how to use them, exclaimed Tom. I learned it in Canada a few winters ago, but I will admit I couldn't beat the wolves in a race. However, the shoes may come in handy yet. Just then one of the wolves threw his body against the door, and the small cabin shook with the force of the blow. By Jove, exclaimed David, I thought they had us then. Another blow like that and the old latch might give way. They looked about them for something to place against the door, but there was not a stick of furniture in the room. Even the bed in one corner was made of pine boughs and skins. I wonder how there happened to be only 5 wolves, said Anne. I thought they went about in large packs. They are probably Mama and Papa and the whole family, replied Hippy. The smallest, friskiest ones, I think, are young ladies, by the way they switched along behind the others and hung back kind of shy-like. Now, Hippy Wingate, don't tell us such a romance as that, warned Grace, when you were so winded you could hardly look in front of you, much less behind you. At that moment there was another crash against the door, while 2 grey paws and the tip of a pointed muzzle could be seen on one of the window-sills. It's almost 3 o'clock, said Tom Gray, looking at his watch. I think we'll have to do something, or we shall be penned here all night. Now what shall it be? Suppose we have a friendly council and consider. All right, said David. The meeting is open for suggestions. What do you advise, Anne? Anne smiled thoughtfully. I have no advice to offer, she said, unless you shoot one of the wolves and let the others eat him up. Perhaps that would take the edge off their appetites. No, that would only serve as an appetizer, answered David. After they had eaten one member of the family, they would be still hungrier for another. And yet that isn't a half bad idea, said Tom, and for 2 reasons. Did you notice a path which began at the hut and which was evidently Jean's trail? I saw it from the corner of my eye as I ran. No, the others had not noticed anything of the sort, but who would stop to think of trails with a pack of hungry wolves at his heel? Tom's training in the woods had taught him to take in such details, and consequently he had noticed it particularly. Moreover, the trail led straight to the left, presumably toward the west. Now this is what I propose to do, he continued, taking down the snowshoes and looking over their straps and fastenings carefully. Reddy, who I hear is a good shot, must climb up at one of the windows and shoot the first wolf he sees. Eating the dead wolf would probably occupy the attention of his brothers for some 10 minutes or so, perhaps longer. While they are busy, I shall make off on the snowshoes. With that much of a start, and with plenty of tasty human beings close at hand, I doubt if they even follow me. If they do, why, I'll just shin up a tree. But I believe I can beat them. I'm pretty good on snowshoes. Tom Gray, you shan't do it, cried Grace. It may mean sure death. How do you know the wolves won't seize you the moment you open the door? Besides, you don't know the way. Suppose you should get lost. No, no, insisted Tom. None of these things will happen. I know positively that a hungry wolf will stop chasing a human being and eat up a dead wolf, or a shoe, or a rug, or anything that happens to be thrown to him. I never was surer of anything in my life than that I can get away from here before the beasts know it. There was a storm of protestation from the others, but Tom Gray finally overruled every objection, and they reluctantly consented to let him go. It was arranged that Reddy should stand on a bench by one of the small windows and attract the attention of the wolves by throwing out a rabbit skin that was nailed to one of the walls. While the beasts were tearing this to pieces, he was to shoot one of them. Furthermore, the instant the live wolves had finished devouring the dead one, Reddy was to pitch out another skin, of which there were many about the hut, of foxes, rabbits, and other small animals, which the trapper had collected. This, they agreed, would probably keep the wolves occupied for a while, until Tom had got a good start down the trail. Tom slipped his feet in the snowshoes and stood by the door waiting. While the wolves howled and fought over the rabbit skin, bang went the rifle. I got him, cried Reddy. In an instant, Tom Gray had flung open the door and was off down the trail. As he had expected, the live wolves were hungrily eating the dead one, and had not apparently even noticed his departure. The boys and girls in the hut sat breathlessly waiting, while Reddy watched the famished animals gorge themselves with the blood and fresh meat of their comrade. Reddy had rolled up a fox skin into a small bundle and was prepared to pitch it out to them the moment they had finished. Just as they had lapped the last drop of blood, he cast out the skin. They sniffed at it a moment, gave a long, disapproving howl that sent the cold chills down the spines of the prisoners, and then made off down the trail after Tom Gray. Reddy gave a loud exclamation and jumped down from the bench. "They followed Tom!" he cried in a high state of excitement. There was a long pause. "We'll have to go then," said David finally. "Girls, you are safe as long as you stay inside the hut, and some of us at least will be able to bring help before long." With that, all 3 of the boys, for Hippy was no coward in spite of his size and appetite, rushed out of the hut and disappeared in the wood. The afternoon shadows were beginning to lengthen when Grace fastened the latch and returned to the fire, where her 3 friends sat silent, afraid to speak for fear of giving way to tears. End of chapter 19.